2012, there were an estimated 371,529 Brazilian Americans living in the United States. Brazilian American culture is a very misunderstood yet important culture in today's society. By the end of this speech, you should have a better understanding on the culture itself, its stereotypes that it faces on a daily basis, and new ways to help understand and kind of acknowledge and spread the word about this really important culture that I think we should all become more aware of. A background on the Brazilian immigration in the United States. The first known arrival of it was in 1940. All other known arrivals of it were unknown because they were never separated from other dark-skinned people that were immigrating into the United States, and people just weren't aware of this culture itself and that people from Brazil were coming into the United States. There was a big spark in the immigration of Brazilians in the 1980s after an economic crisis in Brazil. And most of these immigrants that were coming in at this time were coming in on just temporary tourist visas. The number of the Brazilian immigrants living in the United States has almost tripled since this time, which is just amazing to understand that we've come just such a long way since just in the past few decades. This is a closer look at it's a chart of the Brazilian immigrations coming into the United States. And it just basically shows that it has substantially grown since its first acknowledged immigrant group that came in 1940, which just shows that we've already done such a good job of welcoming people here, and that people from Brazil do look at the United States as a place that they want to come. Since then, decades later, it's just still a really not very well acknowledged and known culture. It's very unknown that it's not as importantly acknowledged as it should be. The first arrival is actually unknown because they weren't separated from other cultures from South America, and no one was really sure that if they were from Brazil or a different country in South America. They were unable to differentiate the Brazilians from Hispanics and Mexicans, and they assumed that Brazilians spoke Brazilian, which is not actually a language, so then they would go to the next option, so they assumed they would speak Spanish, which was not accurate at all either. It's commonly categorized into the Mexican culture because they look the same and people think that they talk the same and that they're just in the same category. They're considered a hard culture to separate from other South American ones just because they all come from the same place and people just kind of throw them all into the same category, which after speaking to my interviewee, Amanda, that I work with, her family is from Brazil, they said that it's just a really frustrating thing that they face every single day. Amanda says that she faces it every day and that people will always speak Spanish to her thinking that that's what she speaks to, and that it's just very frustrating, and she just doesn't understand why more people aren't more open to learning and acknowledging that her culture is not the same. She does use this bias to be more beneficial to society, and her family really tries to make other people aware when they don't really understand what her culture is. They just really, really try to make sure people are educated and raise awareness on their culture. Her culture, according to the book by Corey Floyd, Communication Matters, her Brazilian culture is very collective and family-oriented. They said that they will never leave the house without hugging and kissing each other goodbye and telling everyone where they go. They have very strong traditions that they believe are really important to maintaining their culture and just keeping their family really well put together and just making sure their culture stays stronger so that when people don't understand it, they can help to educate and further. According to Census.gov, the Brazilian American culture has tripled since its big spark in the immigration here since the 1980s. It is the United States is the home to the biggest amount of Brazilian immigrants, other than the people who do live actually in Brazil. It just has substantially grown in the United States since it first started coming in the 1940s, or as we know, it could have even been before. It still remains just as misunderstood as it did then, just because people aren't as open to understanding what it is and how it works and its traditions and cultures, and it just faces a lot of bias on a daily basis, honestly. Although it can sometimes be challenging to deal with, the people of the culture, like Amanda and her family, are really open to making people aware and educating people on the biases that it faces and how we can kind of use the bias to make it more beneficial to us and making sure people are aware of it. Hopefully, you all have a better understanding of her culture and will now know to kind of be aware of the biases that they face and try and lessen it from your point of view, and then helping others around you to do the same. If we stay focused on making sure that ourselves and the people around us are aware of the biases that we kind of put towards Brazilian Americans, we can keep the population here in America of the Brazilian immigrants at the highest rate that it is around the entire